Right, let's start the video. Even if it's late, I can still make one, so let's get to it. Let's talk about maintaining stability in individual training. Now, when I say stability here, I'm referring to stability of a community, culture, or country. So I don't mean like personal stability. That is something you take care of mentally, and it's an entirely separate thing. But when it comes to maintaining stability for groups, so collections of individuals, there are a few things that need to be taken into consideration. Now, for one, the obvious is simple. Stability is needed to have a better future, and as such, it should be and must be maintained. See, when you have a society, or really anything, people want continuity, the ability to trust that their investments will pay off. Let's give an easy example with the stock market, since it's currently struggling right now. When I invest a buck in the stock market, could be in any company, could be in the S&P index as a whole, or something that monitors a similar thing. When I do that, what I'm effectively saying is I believe that over time this investment will grow. There's going to be some instability inherently, especially with the stock market as things change by the hour, sometimes even quicker than that. I mean, certain big reveals can definitely cause big impacts, but at the end of the day, the idea of a consistent trend is the reason a lot of people, especially for retirement, invest in the stock market because they think they'll get a stable return. They don't believe that it'll suddenly crash the next day and then rise a bit the day following, and so on and so forth. They believe that over time things will grow. It'll be relatively steady and stable. And that applies to societies as well. Because it doesn't just have to be monetary investment. Think about an emotional investment, like committing to a person. Let's say you want to start a family, right? So you marry someone, you want that relationship to last, you want consistency to some extent. The idea of constant joys and surprises may feel great in the moment, but in the long term, it causes problems because, well, that spontaneity dries up, and what do you have after? Nothing, really. Often just a race to resources. So you want that consistency, the ability to trust a person to stay, not necessarily the same, but at least consistent, especially on moral principles, since that's why you marry them or stay in a relationship with them is you can trust them to invest in you and to maintain a moral consistency. But of course, shakeups are going to happen, and when they do, they should be spontaneous, useful, and short lived. Let me give you an example. The end of slavery. What was it? It was a war. Quick, done, and we moved on. The longer it lasted, specifically how long it took, the worse it tended to be because it took too long to actually be very effective. The shakeup was quick in the US, and that led to a lot of benefits. Naturally, slow progressive change can be good, but generally speaking, if you're gonna change something, it's better just to let the bloodletting occur real quick, bandage it up, and move on. You generally don't want things to drag out too long, especially when you want to maintain stability over a long period. If people are going to suffer, I guarantee you they'd rather take a bit of pain now than a dragged out slog of pain, because that builds up over time, and that's not something people like. They don't find that good. So if you want to maintain stability, it's better to have a quick, decisive change that allows for a new status quo that can be relied upon than a long and tedious change. Because plain and simply, people get annoyed. Take the Progressive Era as another instance. It was drawn out, and so people got tired of it. A lot of people tend to ignore this when thinking about Theodore Roosevelt, Taft, Wilson, and the short reaction to it following World War I, but the drawn out nature of the Progressive Era actually led to the more laissez faire capitalism, and I say more, it still was fairly regulated after the Progressive Era, those laws didn't go away, of the Roaring Twenties. People wanted a return to normalcy, a return to stability, and that's where Coolidge came in. That's where the immediate reaction was, because people just wanted someone to say, hey, I'll keep a steady course, things won't change too much, you can relax and enjoy yourself. That's what people wanted, and that's what society needed. Because let's face it, if you're constantly changing things, no one can make a proper plan or decision. Imagine if there's a rule on the books one day that's removed the next and reinstated in a slightly different version the day after. People can't plan for that. People can't act accordingly. Who knows who should be arrested for what or who should do what? Because if everything's changing, whether it be constant or in the case of drawn out situations, dragged out and constantly changing during that period, well, people are just going to be confused, and that annoys them. It leads to poor reactions, and people, when having poor reactions, tend not to act in the best and most useful manners. They tend to act petulant and annoyed because, well, they're stressed. And stressed people are like landmines. They don't enjoy the situation, and so, if too much pressure is applied, they go boom. And thus, you want to maintain a quick shake-up, if necessary, to change something, and then ride out the next. Because if it is too long, what happens? People get annoyed, they get stressed, and they want a replacement. And for you, if you're trying to enact policy, that's a problem. If it's your community and you want to keep pushing change, then you're going to run into a lot of people who are either annoyed, pessimistic, or apathetic. And so you won't win. You won't get what you want. And thus, stability must be maintained, and shake-ups to change things about that stability, if necessary, should be quick and effective. But how do we maintain that stability? Well, to do so, you need noble behavior, trusting people, and responsible actions, along with a continuous observance of honesty, both in word and action. Why? Well, because noble behavior builds that trust. Responsible actions reinforce honesty. And being trusting encourages the rest. They work together. And they maintain stability because people are able to trust. They're able to relax, to say, hey, I can put my feet down and not act aggressively. I can do what is necessary and simultaneously trust that I don't need to take any more precautions because everyone else is reliable. I can relax. When people are able to put their guard down, they can maintain stability effectively because there's a trust. If there is continuity, people can let their guards down, but importantly, if people are acting in a way to do so, they maintain that continuity in and of itself. Because people don't act out if they don't see a reason to or don't feel an impulse for it. Noble behavior relaxes people. Constant immoral behavior, or frankly atrocious behavior, doesn't. It riles people up. If someone acts like a buffoon or a moron, do you think people are calmer? Or do you think they're more amped, worried, and otherwise unpredictable? It sure as heck ain't the more relaxed one. In order to have continuity, you need to be able to trust. Why? Because when you can't trust, your mind is going to act accordingly. And when your mind acts accordingly, it's not going to be in a relaxed zone. I may be misremembering because, frankly, me getting therapy was quite a bit ago, but a good way to imagine it is like a circle with 3 rings: green, yellow, and red. The more outward you go, the more stressed you are. Yellow is the state of somewhat distrusting and general suspicion. Red is fight or flight level of freaking move it. And green is the relaxed sense, the ability, the place where you can put your guard down. If you have people constantly in yellow and red states, they're going to be burdened, they're going to be stressed, and they're not going to act appropriately, because let's face it, they're not in the right mood to. Why would they act appropriately? They're worried something is about to go wrong. And that doesn't help anyone. And honesty is important for that because, well, if people look transparent, even if they aren't completely, no one's going to be completely honest, that's just reality. But if they look it, people are willing to say, yeah, I can relax here. I mean, if something is wrong, they're going to tell me. Or if someone has a personality trait that I need to be aware of, they're going to mention it or act accordingly. And so I can react as necessary to that. All of these things are needed to maintain stability, to maintain that continuous perseverance of a society and a status quo. In order to encourage the above actions, shaming of those who go against key societal values is needed. To a certain extent. Naturally, you shouldn't just shame someone because they're mildly different. That is, frankly, stupid. There are limits to how far shaming should go, but it is still needed. I'm sorry, but someone doing something really dumb needs to be called out for doing something really dumb. If you punch a child, ignoring the legal ramifications, you should be shamed for it. Because if you don't care about the law, but you do care about what others think, well then, guess what? People saying they don't like what you did is going to affect you. People do care about what others think. Why? Because we're social creatures. Unless under certain circumstances, which I'm sure there are at least a few people like this, where you quite literally do not care. Your brain cannot process it to the point where you don't feel any concern about others or their opinions. Except for those circumstances, everyone cares about what others think to some degree. It's not the same. Definitely it tends to spike during puberty because everything's changing, so you're naturally confused, and thus what others think is definitely more on your mind than usual. But there will always be some level of care. And so shaming of those who do things that aren't expected, or more importantly, those things that should not be done, is beneficial because it creates a negative response. After all, if you don't want to get a reaction, and the reason you're getting a reaction is because of X, then naturally you're going to want to stop doing X or change it to Y. Excuse me. That being said, of course, there are limits, and you shouldn't just shame people needlessly, or encourage death or suicide or anything else. There are limits, firm limits. You should say that's not good. You should choose not to associate with someone if it's really bad, but you should never go to the extra line of, oh, you should die, or you don't matter. Sure, some people legitimately do not have much of an influence, but everyone matters to some extent because they have potential, they have uses. Even if that use is just to keel over and die because they're a murderer who has betrayed everyone else. Even under those very specific and very extreme circumstances, everyone still has something they could do, something they could be useful for. I mean, heck, even pieces of poop have their purpose as fertilizer. Nothing is without its use. There are benefits, there are drawbacks, but there are always something to do and something to exist for. And so, naturally, people shouldn't just go to the extreme end. To further this point, people should not be made complete pariahs for one misdeed. Engaging in active harmful behavior should be shamed, without question, but you shouldn't just completely isolate people. That doesn't help. You need to shame them while making it clear that they can be welcomed back, that they aren't a lost cause. Why? Well, because if they're a lost cause, why change? It doesn't matter if they do. But if there's a benefit to change, well, then they'll start considering it. And sure, some may not, but many will consider changing. And that is useful and beneficial. A lot of people may say, oh, that's cruel. Maybe it is. Tell me, would you want to deal with a person who absolutely doesn't care about you, who treats you like garbage? No, you wouldn't. And the best way to stop that person is to make it clear that their behavior is unacceptable, that they cannot engage in such behavior and expect good results. You must establish, first and foremost, that right is right and wrong is wrong, and that there are consequences for doing wrong. That is what must be done, and it must be modeled on behavior. Freak, that is loud. Deepest apologies on that front. But, simultaneously, while shame is necessary, so is praise. Praise should be accompanied with the shame, but specifically for good behavior. And people must understand that no one is perfect. No one is. I'm definitely not. I'm sure the people watching are not. I know my family isn't. I know the people on my campus aren't. No one is perfect. Not a single person. They could be the highest monarch, the lowest pauper, or anyone in between. No one is perfect. Even those we worship as heroes have their flaws. Even those we praise as villains, or hate as villains, depending on our stances on them, have their benefits. No one is perfectly one way or the other, because we all have our interests and our beliefs, and naturally, that creates good and bad. You can still judge which is greater, absolutely, and you can say absolutely that there are certain lines that can't be crossed. But good behavior is good behavior, and it should be praised. Because not only is shame effective as a deterrent, but especially effective is encouragement. If you see someone doing something and getting a reward for it, you'll think, hey, I want that too. How do I get that? Oh, well, I do this and this. Okay, so I'll do that and get it. If you want people to behave as you wish, you're never going to completely be able to force them. That's just reality. But you can definitely encourage them to push in certain ways. By offering praise for good behavior, or that behavior which is enjoyed, and offering shame for bad behavior, or that which is disdained. Essentially, you could call it Pavlovian conditioning, but we're not using a bell here. The idea of it is fairly simple, but it's effective, and it is important. To maintain stability in a society, this must be implemented. Why? Well, think about it. What maintains society? These behaviors. And what destroys society? The abandonment of them. The choosing to act in irresponsible ways. To completely abandon any trust for anything, to not act nobly, and to instead act immorally, and to be consistently deceitful. As such, shame is necessary for those immoral traits, or negative traits, while praise is necessary for the moral ones. Because in order to maintain continuity, you have to encourage those traits which maintain it, and must discourage those that don't. That is how the ship stays its course. That is how we keep things moving in the proper way. Naturally, nothing can change overnight, but over time, things can definitely get put in the right direction. And if a shake-up is needed, make it quick, because the scales don't like being unbalanced for long. They like being balanced for as long as possible. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.